It's complicated. And I'm completely wrecked. I'm turning 37 next month, and I feel like my entire life has just imploded. 8 months ago, I was basically running our family's jewelry business. Now, I'm picking up the pieces of a shattered life and trying to figure out if I'm the villain in this whole damn mess. The story starts like this. My sister, Bethany, who had been essentially estranged from our family for years, suddenly reappeared, draped in designer clothes and flashing a diamond ring the size of a small glacier. Attached to said ring was her obscenely wealthy fiancé, Chad. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, my dad, the man who swore I'd inherit the business, decided to hand it all over to them as some kind of welcome back gift. I know! It sounds insane. Now, Dad's calling me from a hospital bed, begging for forgiveness, and, well, I'm just not sure what to do. I need to get this off my chest, and maybe some outside perspective will help me make sense of it all. Here's the story. Our family business, Sterling Treasures, was my grandfather's legacy. He started it from nothing, a tiny stall in a flea market, and built it into a reputable jewelry store in our city. Dad inherited it after him, and I always knew that it would be mine someday. I'm the older sister, and I've been obsessed with the business since I was a teenager. I spent summers polishing silver, reorganizing displays, even trying my hand at basic repairs under the watchful eye of old Mr. Henderson, our master goldsmith. Bethany? She couldn't tell a diamond from a cubic zirconia if her life depended on it. Dad always said I was the heir apparent. He'd joke about how Bethany was too busy chasing boys and skipping college classes to worry about spreadsheets and inventory. It wasn't officially written down anywhere, and looking back, maybe that was my biggest mistake. I just trusted him. After 2 years at a marketing firm after college, I quit and joined the family business. Dad swore he needed me, that he couldn't manage everything without me. Looking back, he probably just wanted free labor, but at the time, I was thrilled. I saw it as my apprenticeship, my preparation for the inevitable day when I'd take over the reins. I became Dad's right hand, his personal assistant, the one who knew every detail of the business inside and out. 12 years. I poured 12 years of my life into Sterling Treasures, learning every aspect of the operation, from managing the books to negotiating with suppliers to handling our most demanding clients. And then Bethany showed up, after disappearing for 15 years. To understand why this was so devastating, you need to know about Bethany's track record. Right after her 18th birthday, she announced she was ditching college to go find herself. Cue the dramatic fight with my parents. They gave her an ultimatum, college or the door. Bethany, always headstrong and impulsive, chose the door. She moved in with some loser boyfriend, swore she was better off without us, and said some incredibly hurtful things to my parents. Accused them of being small-minded and unambitious, practically spat on our family's values. She even bragged about her boyfriend's family being richer than ours, like that somehow made them better people. The relationship predictably imploded within 6 months. Bethany came crawling back, expecting forgiveness. Dad, ever the hard ass, laid down the same terms: get a degree, any degree, or stay away. Bethany, true to form, refused and stormed off, declaring she'd never darken our doorstep again. For the next 15 years, we only saw her at obligatory family events, like funerals or weddings. We learned about her life through the grapevine, from distant cousins and gossipy aunts. She bounced from job to job, never really settling down. Mom and I tried to reach out a few times, but Bethany refused to speak to us as long as Dad was still in the picture. She was nothing if not stubborn. Then, about a year ago, Dad got seriously ill. Major heart problems. The cardiologist told us things were dire, that he needed to make drastic lifestyle changes or, well, the implication was clear. Dad, facing his own mortality, finally decided to swallow his pride and reach out to Bethany. And, to everyone's surprise, she answered. She'd apparently been tracking Dad's health through the same relatives we used to track hers. When she finally visited, it was just her. No boyfriend, no apologies for the past, just a quiet reconciliation with Dad. It was emotional, messy, but ultimately it felt good. I was happy for them. Or at least, I thought I was. I was too focused on Dad's relief, the newfound peace in his eyes, to see what was coming. The second visit, Bethany brought Chad. He was everything Bethany's previous boyfriends weren't: polished, sophisticated, and radiating wealth. Expensive suit, designer watch, shoes that probably cost more than my rent. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely smitten with Bethany. He was, as we soon learned, the heir to a massive fast food empire. My initial reaction was relief. Finally, Bethany had found someone who could provide her with the security and stability she'd always craved. I congratulated them, toasted to their happiness, and genuinely believed that everything was finally falling into place. I couldn't have been more wrong. 3 weeks. That's all it took. 3 weeks of Bethany and Chad charming their way into my parents' lives before my dad decided to completely upend my entire existence. It started with a phone call. Dad sounded serious, said he needed to talk to me about something important. I was at the store, dealing with a frantic bridezilla and a shipment of slightly off-color pearls, but I dropped everything and rushed over to my parents' house. Bethany and Chad weren't there, which I thought was odd. Mom and Dad were sitting in the living room, looking like they'd just witnessed a tragedy. After some strained small talk, Dad dropped the bomb. He wanted Bethany and Chad to take over Sterling Treasures. I stared at him, dumbfounded. I honestly thought it was a joke, a really bad, insensitive joke. When I realized he was serious, I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me. Dad, what are you talking about? I finally managed to stammer. I've been running this business for 12 years. You always said it would be mine. He hemmed and hawed, avoided eye contact, and finally mumbled something about trust. I think Bethany and Chad are better suited to take the business to the next level, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I felt a surge of anger, hot and visceral. Better suited? They don't know anything about jewelry. Bethany spent the last 15 years bouncing between dead-end jobs, and Chad's a fast food tycoon. How is that better suited? Dad sighed, a long, weary sound. They have business acumen, Amelia. Chad's father built a whole empire. They know how to expand, how to modernize. You're good at managing the day-to-day, but you lack the vision. Vision? I'd spent years streamlining our operations, expanding our online presence, and cultivating relationships with new designers. I'd weathered economic downturns, navigated tricky supplier negotiations, and kept the business afloat through sheer grit and determination. And he was telling me I lacked vision? Then came the kicker. Besides, Dad continued, this is a welcome back gift for Bethany, a way to show her we're truly happy to have her back in the family. A welcome back gift? A business was a welcome back gift? My entire future, my life's work, was being handed over to my sister and her fiancé as some kind of extravagant peace offering? I tried to reason with him, to appeal to his sense of fairness, to remind him of all the sacrifices I'd made for the business. I suggested a partnership, a gradual transition, anything that would allow me to retain some control over my own destiny. But Dad was adamant. He'd made up his mind. He believed Chad's business connections and entrepreneurial spirit would propel Sterling Treasures to new heights. He was convinced that Bethany, with Chad by her side, would be a better leader than I could ever be. I pleaded, I argued, I begged. I reminded him of his promises, of the years I'd dedicated to the business, of the dreams we'd shared. It was like talking to a brick wall. He refused to budge. Finally, exhausted and defeated, I asked him the question that had been gnawing at me since he first dropped the news. Why, Dad? Why are you doing this to me? He looked at me, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of guilt and determination. Because I think this is what's best for the business, he said. And because I think this is what's best for Bethany. That was it. He was choosing Bethany over me, choosing a fleeting reconciliation over years of loyalty and dedication. He was sacrificing my future for the sake of appeasing his long-lost daughter. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't just losing a business. I was losing my father's respect, his trust, his love. 12 years of my life reduced to nothing. I stood up, my legs trembling, and said the only thing I could think of. "I'm done," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm done with this family. I'm done with Sterling Treasures." I walked out of the house, leaving my parents staring after me, their faces a mask of shock and confusion. I didn't look back. That was the day I cut all ties with my family. I expected Bethany to at least put up a fight, to acknowledge the unfairness of the situation. But she didn't. She and Chad happily accepted their wedding gift, posing for photos, beaming with pride, and posting gushing thank you messages on social media. Bethany, the prodigal daughter, was finally home. And I, the dutiful daughter, was cast aside without a second thought. The silence from my family was deafening. No calls, no texts, no attempts to reach out and explain or apologize. It was as if I'd ceased to exist. I felt like I'd been used, exploited, and then discarded like yesterday's trash. I was lucky enough to have some savings. I was able to survive and even stay afloat. I took time to grieve, to process my anger and resentment, to try and rebuild my shattered sense of self-worth. It was a long, painful process. I started therapy. My therapist diagnosed me with a major depressive disorder, triggered by the betrayal and loss. I'd lost my future, my purpose, and a significant part of my identity. Seeing Bethany's endless posts on social media was like twisting a knife in an open wound. The expensive vacations, the designer clothes, the lavish parties, all funded by my life's work. I blocked her on every platform, but the whispers still managed to reach me through mutual friends and relatives, which is why I cut off contact with most of my family. I told them I needed space, that I couldn't handle hearing about Bethany's new life. They respected my wishes, or at least pretended to. I went into lockdown, focusing on healing and trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. I had no idea that, behind the carefully curated image of success and happiness, my dad's health was rapidly deteriorating, and that Bethany and Chad, the supposed saviors of Sterling Treasures, were completely checked out. The call came a week ago. It was Dad. I'd blocked his number, so he had to use one of the nurses' phones to reach me. He told me he'd had a heart attack, that he was in the hospital, and that he needed to see me. Guilt washed over me, sharp and immediate. I remembered all the times he'd supported me, all the sacrifices he'd made. I pushed aside the bitterness and resentment, the hurt and anger, and focused on the fact that my father was lying in a hospital bed, possibly dying. "I'll be there," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I dropped everything and rushed to the hospital. Mom was there, looking pale and exhausted. But Bethany and Chad were nowhere to be seen. The absence of my sister and her fiancé was immediately and uncomfortably present. "Where are they?" I asked, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice. Dad looked away, a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. "They're busy," he mumbled. "Busy?" "Too busy to visit their father-in-law in the hospital after a heart attack." I knew how the business was running under them, and even if there were a big problem, someone could have been here. Even when I was running things, I still had time to go to the hospital for family matters. Something was clearly amiss. I pressed him for details. Had they been to see him at all? Had they even called? He admitted that they hadn't. They'd sent a text message saying they were too busy to come to the hospital and would visit him when he was discharged. I was stunned, and, if I was being honest with myself, a little bit gratified. It seemed like Dad was finally starting to see the reality of the situation. He confirmed my suspicions. He'd made a mistake, a huge, Devastating mistake. Amelia, he said, his voice weak but firm. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I let my pride get in the way. I should have trusted you. You were always the one who cared about the business, about this family. He told me how Bethany and Chad had been increasingly distant since taking over Sterling Treasures. The frequent visits had dwindled to nothing. Excuses about work, about meetings, about life. He tried to brush it off, to tell himself they were just busy, but deep down he knew something was wrong. The heart attack, he said, was the final straw. Their indifference had shattered his illusions. He realized that they didn't care about him, not the way he'd thought they did. They'd used him, exploited him, and then abandoned him. I want you to come back, Amelia, he said, his eyes pleading. I want you to take back the business. It's yours. It always should have been yours. The words hung in the air, a promise of redemption, a chance to reclaim everything I'd lost. Relief and vindication washed over me, but also a deep sense of sadness. It had taken a near-death experience for my father to finally see the truth. I agreed to think about it. I couldn't just erase 8 months of pain and betrayal with a single conversation. But the idea of reclaiming Sterling Treasures, of proving myself, of finally getting the recognition I deserved, it was too tempting to resist. We talked for hours. He apologized for everything he'd said, everything he'd done. He acknowledged the pain he'd caused me, the unfairness of his decision. He begged for my forgiveness. I hadn't completely forgiven him, but I knew that for me to move on, I needed to forgive him. If it was the only way for me to reclaim my business, then I was willing to do it. To me, nothing was more important than getting back what I deserved. I forgave him in that moment. It wasn't a true forgiveness, not yet, but it was a first step. Then, he told me something that threw the entire situation into chaos again. He told me that he had also talked to Bethany. He told her that he wanted her and Chad to step aside, that he had finally realized they weren't the right people to run the business. He told her that he was taking it back. Unsurprisingly, Bethany wasn't happy. The phone rang early this morning. It was Bethany, and she was furious. How could you do this to me, Amelia? She screamed into the phone. How could you be so cruel? You're taking everything away from me. I was taken aback by her vehemence. Bethany, what are you talking about? Dad made the decision. I didn't ask him to do this. I'm not the one who abandoned him in the hospital. Don't play innocent with me, she retorted. You've been plotting this all along? You manipulated Dad into changing his mind. You're trying to ruin my life. I was genuinely bewildered. Bethany, I haven't spoken to you in months. I didn't even know Dad was sick until he called me from the hospital. How could I have been plotting anything? You always hated me, Amelia, she accused. You were always jealous of me. You couldn't stand the thought of me being successful. You're a bitter, resentful woman who can't stand to see anyone else happy. Her words stung even though I knew they weren't true. I had never hated Bethany. I'd always wanted her to be happy. But I also wanted her to be fair, to be honest, to acknowledge the sacrifices I'd made for the business. I thought that she had no problem letting me be kicked out of the family business, but now when the shoe is on the other foot, she has an issue. I said to myself, you were the selfish one in the situation, I told her. If you had just visited our dad, you wouldn't be getting yourself into this situation. This is my fault for not visiting Dad? I've been working hard to keep the business afloat, she said defensively. I almost laughed at what she said. Working hard? Please don't tell me you've been doing any hard work. Anyone that has seen both you and Chad knows neither of you two know how to put in hard work. You know what? She said to me. I regret even coming back into the family because of you. I don't know why you're so mad, I responded. From the start 8 months ago, you had absolutely no problem accepting a gift you knew you didn't deserve. So why should I turn my back on something I actually do deserve now? She ranted for another 10 minutes, spewing accusations and insults. I tried to reason with her, to explain that I wasn't trying to hurt her. that I was just trying to reclaim what was rightfully mine. But it was no use. She was too blinded by anger and resentment to listen. Finally, I hung up the phone, feeling drained and exhausted. I couldn't understand why she was so angry. She had a rich fiancé, a life of luxury. Why was she so fixated on sterling treasures? It didn't make sense. Then it dawned on me. Could it be that things weren't as perfect as they seemed? Could it be that Chad's wealth wasn't as solid as everyone believed? I remembered hearing whispers about Chad's father's company facing financial difficulties. I had brushed them aside, assuming they were just rumors. But now, I wondered if there was more to the story. Could Bethany and Chad have been trying to use sterling treasures as a safety net? A backup plan in case their lavish lifestyle came crashing down around them? The thought was unsettling. It would explain Bethany's desperate reaction, her exaggerated sense of entitlement, her willingness to sacrifice my future for her own gain. I decided to do some digging. I contacted a few old colleagues, people I trusted, and asked them to look into Chad's father's business. What they found confirmed my worst fears. Chad's father's company was crumbling. They were facing massive debts, lawsuits, and a rapidly declining market share. The fast food empire was on the verge of collapse. Bethany and Chad weren't the saviors of sterling treasures. They were parasites, trying to latch onto a healthy organism to survive. They saw our family business as their lifeline, their escape from financial ruin. And now, their plan was falling apart. I felt a surge of anger, not just at Bethany and Chad, but at my father as well. He had been so blinded by his desire to reconcile with Bethany that he had almost destroyed everything I'd worked for. He had nearly handed our family business over to a pair of con artists. But now, he was giving me the opportunity to set things right, to reclaim what was rightfully mine, to protect sterling treasures from the vultures circling overhead. The question was I willing to take it? Was I willing to step back into the family drama? To face Bethany's wrath? To potentially sacrifice my own peace of mind for the sake of the business? I wrestled with the decision for hours. On the one hand, I wanted to move on with my life, to build a new future independent of my family. On the other hand, I couldn't bear the thought of seeing sterling treasures fall into the wrong hands, of watching Bethany and Chad squander everything my grandfather had built. In the end, the answer was clear. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let my family's legacy be destroyed by greed and deceit. I called my father. "I'll do it," I said. "I'll come back." But on my terms. He was overjoyed. He promised me complete control, assured me that he would do everything in his power to make things right. He said he was already talking to lawyers, drafting the paperwork to transfer ownership back to me. The transition wouldn't be easy. Bethany and Chad wouldn't give up without a fight. There would be more drama, more accusations, more heartache. But I was ready. I was ready to face the challenges, to confront my family, to reclaim my future. I was ready to be the CEO of Sterling Treasures. So, Reddit, Ada for letting my dad take back our family business from my sister? I know it sounds harsh, but I honestly feel like I'm doing the right thing. But after everything that's happened, I'm starting to question my own judgment. Am I being selfish? Am I letting my anger cloud my decision-making? Or am I simply fighting for what I deserve? I've been thinking about this for days, going over every conversation, every interaction, trying to make sense of it all. And I've come to a conclusion. Bethany and Chad were playing us all along. It wasn't just about a welcome back gift. It was a calculated, deliberate attempt to infiltrate our family business and take control. My sister was the ringleader and Chad was her partner in crime. Everything makes sense now. Bethany's sudden return, her charming fiancé, my dad's blind faith in their abilities. It was all part of their plan. They saw Sterling Treasures as their ticket to financial security, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get it, even if it meant sacrificing me and exploiting my father's vulnerability. The most infuriating thing is that my father was so quick to believe them, so eager to embrace the prodigal daughter, that he completely ignored the warning signs. He saw what he wanted to see, not the reality of the situation. But thankfully, we're lucky that my father didn't sign any documents or contracts and didn't officially hand over the business to my sister and her fiancé, because that would have caused us a lot of trouble. He was still the CEO, they were just working under him in the position I previously held. I think that it was my sister who planted the idea in my father's head to welcome them back into the family by handing over the business to her future husband, and unfortunately, he fell for it. I only found all of this out recently after reconnecting with my father. He told me that he wasn't thinking clearly, he was being greedy because for some reason, he believed that a man from such an established business family would be better at running everything than I would. Originally, he had planned to keep me in the position I'd been working in, but when I told him I wasn't interested in the business unless I got to be in charge, he lost his patience, and that led to these 8 months of absolute misery for both of us. There was another delay because of Bethany. Speaking of her, she is absolutely not happy about any of this, and I guess I can finally say it now. My theory about her was right. She and her fiancé were actually trying very sneakily to infiltrate our family business and take control so they would have something to fall back on when her fiancé's father's company eventually collapsed. Now, I'm just glad that everything got resolved. I'm officially the new CEO of Sterling Treasures. It feels surreal, like I'm living in an alternate reality. After months of despair and uncertainty, I'm back where I belong, running the business I've always loved. The transition hasn't been easy. There's a lot of damage control to be done, a lot of trust to be rebuilt, but I'm determined to make it work. Now that I'm actually in charge, I'm going to be the best CEO Sterling Treasures has ever had. I'm still angry and hurt by what happened, but I'm trying to channel those emotions into something productive. I'm focusing on the future, on building a stronger, more resilient business. I'm also making sure things are more secure. My worst case scenario is for my sister and her fiancé to get control of the company again, and the possibility is 0 now. I'm going to run this business to the ground before I let anything of the sort happen again. The lawyers have been working around the clock to finalize the transfer of ownership. And finally, the official documents have been signed. I've also had a chance to reconnect with my father. He's still recovering from the heart attack, but he's slowly getting stronger. He's also come to his senses just in time, and we were able to avoid a huge disaster. One day before it was finalized that I would become the CEO, my sister reached out and contacted me. She reached out to me right before it was finalized that I would become the CEO and told me that she and her fiancé desperately needed jobs because they weren't sure how many more days his father's company could survive. So now she was asking me for help. I told her I would think about it. I have no problem hiring them. It's just that I will never ever be able to trust them again because I knew what their original intentions were. So that's what is making me feel strange right now. I do want to help her, but at the same time, how can I hire people I don't trust anyway? I told her to give me some time, and so far she has agreed, but I don't know what I'm going to do. I guess she's lost her mind, and maybe that's what it is. Reddit, should I do it? Should I hire Bethany and Chad even though I know they betrayed me? On one hand, I feel like it's the morally right thing to do. They're family, and they're clearly desperate. On the other hand, I don't know if I can ever trust them. And I don't want to jeopardize the business by bringing them back into the fold. I need some advice. I've made my decision. I'm not hiring Bethany and Chad. I know this will probably make me seem really selfish to some people, but honestly, I just can't trust them. And I think anyone can understand it based on the facts. The reason is, my father offered them the opportunity to take over the company in the beginning. They accepted it and didn't even bother to contact me for the next 8 months. They had absolutely no compassion or empathy for anyone other than themselves, and I don't want people like that around me or working for me. A few days ago, I had to tell my sister that I couldn't help her. Obviously, she didn't take it well. She showed up at my office and made a scene. I am the CEO and I'm the boss. She told me she regretted even letting me get the company back. I thought that was strange because she had nothing to do with it. It was my father's decision because he was the boss. And what he said went. It wasn't my decision, and now it's not her decision either for her to act like she did me. A huge favor was just ridiculous. I would have tolerated all of that, but that statement really bothered me. So I told her that she hadn't done me any favors neither now nor before. She didn't seem to care about me. So it was pretty stupid of her to expect me to do the same for her. I politely asked her to leave, but she refused and kept yelling at me. She was completely underestimating me, so I decided to call the police and have her removed because I couldn't deal with this level of drama. I'm already busy enough with work and I just don't need this right now. Once the police arrived, she didn't have much to say and just left. It's been a few days since then and we haven't heard from her again, so I guess she's going to leave us alone. And even if she doesn't, I don't care, because I'll get a restraining order against her. It's sad that it came to this, but I have to prioritize the well-being of sterling treasures. And that means keeping people I can't trust far, far away. Now I'm going to focus on being the best CEO I can be. Well, time for an update on a couple things. First off, I wanted to address some comments I've been getting, and then I'll share some developments within the company. Many people have been asking how I could forgive my father so easily. The answer is, I haven't completely. Yes, we have a relationship, but it's not like it was before. I still can't fully trust him. You have to remember that I've been striving to get back to the company. The fact of the matter is that I worked so hard for this company, and I wasn't going to throw all that hard work away. I studied really hard in college, and I also took another job to gain some more experience. Not to mention the years and years of work. I did those all so I could gain more experience. However, if I was to let my pride take over, I would have refused to talk to my father again and I wouldn't have returned. Then I would have nothing. So if I did that, all the hours, blood, sweat, and tears would have been for nothing. Now, I'm in charge of the business, and the documents prove it. Something like what happened 8 months ago can't happen again. It's been a journey getting back here. As for my personal relationship with my father, I'm not going to abandon him because at the end of the day, he's my father, and he's very sick. But he's going to have to do a lot to earn my trust back. I don't want to be like my sister who abandoned him once she got the business. But this is going to take time. I do not believe in giving unconditional trust or forgiveness. As for the other part of the update, some employees and I had noticed some irregularities in the accounting records, so we hired an external firm to audit them. They found some things, but they're still working, so once they're done, we'll have the final report. I'm getting ready and excited to get the news, whatever it may be. We finally have the results of the audit. I think the truth is going to shock a lot of people. It's confirmed my worst fears, but it also provides a sense of closure. The audit showed that my sister and her fiancé had been diverting money into different accounts, which we assume were theirs. The amounts weren't very large individually, but in total, it was a significant sum, and that's why she was really getting after me and mad. I am not one that is easily cheated, and it's an honor to know the truth. I'm disgusted. I'm furious. I'm heartbroken. I want to get some revenge on my sister, but I can't, and I'm not going to. It's not my place to do it. We have presented this information to the police, and now there is an ongoing investigation. Unfortunately, since it's an open investigation, I can't give many details, but I will say this. Bethany and Chad will face the consequences of their actions. They've been playing us all this time. As for me, I'm going to focus on healing, on rebuilding sterling treasures, and on moving forward with my life. I'm a CEO and am successful, so I don't have time to waste. I'll come back to share another update in a few months. It's been a long, difficult road. I've learned a lot about myself, about my family, and about the power of forgiveness. I want to thank everyone for following my story and for offering your support and advice. It means more than you know. Now I want to move on and leave the past behind.